going to break with tradition and go first. I mean, go next. Sorry, too late to go first.
Mm.
So I'm going to talk about one director and three of his movies, which are from three totally different genres. So I thought that would kind of, add some spice to things. I'm going to try to be brief on each one, but you let me know if I get out of control because Keith's not here to rein me in.
Yeah, I
Um,
have to moderate. We're in trouble. This is gonna last all night.
Sorry, here comes the epic story of Giulio Questi. So
Woo!
Giulio Questi, I'm not an expert on Giulio Questi by any means, but I'll just do this in chronological order. So 1967, really, really good year, I have to say. He made a giallo called Death Laid an Egg. And
Oh yeah.
the studio probably, even those studios were probably, because later there were experimental giallos. 67, pretty much you had to either be like Bava, which had only done the three by then, or you had to be the strain like Ernesto Gastaldi, like black and white, very crimmy influence. So we're still kind of early in the cycle, but that year several people did avant-garde giallos. Tinto Brass did Deadly Sweet or Un Corongola, which I highly recommend. And ironically, the stars of that movie, Jean-Louis Trintignant, who stars in The Conformist, um, Jean-Louis Trintignant and Eva Allen were in that movie. Then they did Death Laid an Egg. So they're kind of icons of the giallo avant-garde. That I just made that up. I've never read that, but that's going to be my statement.
That's
Um,
your contribution to the discourse, heard.
yeah, all capitals to the whole sentence. Um, Beulah Allen, later a year later did Candy, but that's a whole nother bag of worms. But Trintignant, was a big, classy, French actor since the early '60s, and all the way really almost through the 2000s when he died. But um, Death Laid an Egg is a giallo, but it's a bait and switch, and the clue should be at the beginning because it's avant-garde. It's a noise soundtrack. It's very much, kind of like I'm trying to think of musicians who were operating in that territory in the '60s. Not many, but surprisingly, a lot of them were Italian. Like, oh God, that one guy's name, I can't remember. Damn it. But I've got a bunch of his albums, did a lot of this kind of stuff. But really it's kind of like it's more like the art movement music that was made by like Fluxus and movements like that. But
Oh yeah.
probably like Jodorowsky's Panic, though what I've seen, that's
Oh
more
yeah.
like jazz, but it was still free jazz. So this is like kind of like free jazz slash noise you'd hear in the 80s by Merzbow or something, except without all the expensive equipment. And which is this music's very common now. It's become almost the soundtrack, of our lives after metal finally did. And I'm like, when black metal and noise suddenly become played in public, I'm like, whoa, we've arrived. We're progress.
We
But
officially won the culture war.
yeah, we won the culture war with music anyway. Well, unfortunately, but that stuff doesn't sell, nor did back then. But it like I said, it has become a wallpaper of our existence, and I think part of it's because it was futuristic 50 years ago, and now it's now.
We've finally caught up.
Exactly,
Yeah.
humanity caught up to avant-garde music. So this is kind of like Peter Maxwell Davies. To give another example, he did that very abstract soundtrack for The Devils by Ken Russell. So, and he also did that insane album, 6 songs for Mad King. So this is like that without vocals, and it's like these basically it looks like watercolors on under like a sheet of glass, which it probably is. Maybe like kind of sheet of glass you have on a microscope, and it's like really blown up. And like Roger Corman did on one of his movies beautifully, he just lets the colors flow naturally and films it. I think Nicholas Roeg shot that movie particularly. Is it Mask of the Red Death, Bill?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
And
So
it is gorgeous.
I love that effect. I mean, just letting paint go. I mean, and this is really wild. So people are, what the hell is this? So anyway, it's a rich industrialist and his wife, who's just played by Gina Lollobrigida, which probably snagged the budget for him. And it's dubbed, but most Italian stuff is. We'll probably get into that later. But it's well dubbed. I will say Italian dubbing is 100% better than Asian dubbing. It doesn't look as unnatural too.
Mm-hmm.
But they own this factory, and basically it's factory farming. And so another way this was ahead of its time, because factory farming, has become a controversial issue. And as someone who was a convert to Singer's book, Animal Liberation, and I'm about to become a vegan or I'll die because of my health, but I'm a vegetarian right now. And then last week I found out I had to become a vegan. So I'm very into animals. They rule. And this movie takes away the way it gets to it is as well as roundabout as I am getting to it. Um, but essentially, they're farming chickens, and it has to keep moving, and so there's all this corporate idea. So embedded in this, as in several other Italian directors who came later, is a political angle, like a sociological, like corporations are bad. My theory on that goes back to what Kalen was talking about, which is the definition of fascism. The literal, the on paper definition of fascism that became popular. I'm not saying he coined the word, but was written by Benito Mussolini. And his definition is, which is very different than most people know, is when the state is owned by corporations, which is what we're living in now in America and most of the
Super
world.
fun.
I mean, we've hit it, and it's sad. But
Yeah.
that is the literal, as in Mussolini, and God knows, wouldn't he know about fascism? I mean, come on. Yeah. Look at the way they killed the motherfucker. So there's this anti-industrial, like, don't trust these plants and these industries, but then it's cool to shoot in them because it looks kind of futuristic and crazy. So aesthetically, this movie has tons of cuts. It has a lot of the avant-garde, like, touches when you don't expect them. So you're trying to figure out the relevance of this as a thriller. And the reason it seems to be a thriller is because after we meet these three characters, because Uwe Allen plays their assistant. So after we meet these three characters, Trintignant is in a hotel room. First, you don't see his face, but then you finally do. And he's wearing these cutout black gloves, and he's got this incredibly stylized blade, and he's got a whip, and he's basically torturing a woman. And it's very, sadistic, masochistic, sadomasochistic. It's probably several Kraft von Ebing's definitions, Kraft Ebing's definitions. It could be a lot of other things, but it's definitely sadomasochism. Okay, BDSM for you people out there nowadays. So this really, you don't know if it's consensual or not. When I first saw it, I assumed it was, since it was a hotel room, it was a prostitute, but I wasn't sure. And also, you are given the impression he murders her. So you've already got right there, you've got one engine for Giallos, and most Giallos, really, that's all they need. Then they just keep going with that. Who did it and how many people is he going to kill, and etc. But it doesn't do that. It keeps the plot with his wife and the girl who he has an affair with. And one of the reasons he has the affair with the girl, besides the fact, obviously, we found out he's sexually adventurous, is that Gina Lollobrigida is, well, she's basically a fascist. She's a pro-corporate, like, by the book, et cetera. So she's not an asshole about it. I'll give her that. Whoever dubbed her has this very sweet little voice. So she's saying, like, these things like, we've got to fight for the corporation, the company, the profits. And you want to hug her, and then you want to punch her. And so she's like, kind of drives him away. But he's also kind of, as Trintignant later did, obviously, in The Conformist, he's good at playing these morally ambiguous characters, hard to read characters by their body language. And this one's pretty oblique. It makes The Conformist look, very extroverted. But the hook, there's two hooks to it. So one is the main plot hook, which is that one of the scientists at the industry invents, this is insane, he does genetic engineering, and he invents a chicken that has no head and no wings, but it's still living. It has a heart and a nervous system and feet, which, you can just cut those off. But that's what popped out when this guy did his thing. And Gina Lollobrigida is like, oh my God, this will revolutionize the meat industry. And people can't accuse us of animal cruelty because it had no brain. And oh my God, this is so great. So they're all happy. The board's happy. The scientists are happy. Gina's happy. And they turned to our man Jean Louis. I can't remember his character's name, and he was like, "These are monsters. This is an abomination against nature. I will not have no part of this. It's disgusting." So then they take him to the well, he says that when they unveil it, a few people. Then when he goes to the board, it's all somber, and they're like, "Well, we need your vote on this. What do you think?" And he's like, he says the same thing, and then they start pressing him. He's like, "No, this is a blasphemy. I will have no part of it, and I have spoken," and he leaves. He didn't quit or anything because I think he owns part of the company, but he's like, "No, I don't want any part of this shit." So he has the affair with Allen's character, young, kind of doe-eyed blonde girl, and I think he believes that she's more sympathetic to what he's going through, these conflicts, which we still haven't resolved the prostitute and the blade and the whip conflict. And then we finally learn, kind of toward the end of Act Two, that these are role playing games. He does hire prostitutes, and they're role playing games. He doesn't kill them. It is a kink of his, but it's perfectly consensual BDSM. I know that's important for everyone watching who's young. On the internet. It's totally consensual. Calm down.
I do want to say,
I know we talk about rape a lot, but this one didn't have any rape. I just want to make that clear.
Also, young people do know about BDSM, at least the ones that I teach do. So
all the young people I know way more about BDSM than I do, and half of them practice it, and I've kind of practiced it once or twice. But so the whole thing is, I've said that on a video before, so I'm not being outed. But so it's a game. It's a release because he's living in this again. Where you go back to the allegorical part. It's his safety valve for his corporate thing. And by this time, though, by the time we learn, hey, he's not a killer, and then you really are sympathizing with this, person who's just become converted to animal rights. They try to murder him. His wife teams up with the girlfriend, and I won't give away the ending. It kind of just happens, but there is a murder in the movie. It's just not the prostitute. He does destroy a lot of the mutant chickens, and that's quite interesting. But seeing them, it's a great special effect. They're like, I guess they have like the bladders, like Rick Baker and Botine early on. That same idea, because it's kind of you just kind of see the heart, the chest rising and falling like the heart, and the legs trying to walk, and then he takes this big metal rod and just destroys like 10 of them, and there's just like blood and gore everywhere. So that's Death Laid an Egg. Let me get my apparatus here in order. So
thanks.
He not immediately, about 3 years later, he tried his hand at spaghetti westerns. And I don't know what this is falling under, the one Bill cites a lot, the what were they thinking? And why do you want to get Questi to do a spaghetti western? They are big. Every Italian director must do at least one spaghetti western. That is a rule. And I really believe that they lived by those kind of rules when it came to those trends and fads. Like, okay, it's your turn to do a giallo. It's your turn to do a spaghetti western. Your turn to do a sword and sandal. And you just have to adapt. Again, that's the commercial, like we said, where they're working directors. So he made Django Kill, If You Live, Shoot, which is capitalizing on the 1966 film Django by Sergio Corbucci, which I'm gonna try not to put too much personal bias. I prefer Corbucci to Leone. Here we go, I'm a heretic. I really do. I prefer his stories. I prefer his style. However, that being said, any level, Kaylin called me out on this the last session. I'm just going to say it. Subjectively or objectively, fuck it. Once Upon a Time in the West is better than anything Corbucci could ever do. That one movie is just,
it is a masterpiece.
Yeah. I prefer Django and The Great Silence on an emotional level, as far as like my top 5. But then like Once Upon a Time in the West is like number 3, going, hey, hold on, we should be number 1, man. So I'm grappling between sentimentality and the way a work of art affects me as art, rather than just.
I feel like it's valid to say this is my favorite for artistic merit, and this is my sentimental favorite. Like they don't have to be the same.
Okay, so Once Upon a
Yeah.
Time in the West is my artistic favorite spaghetti western. I think it's the best
That's
one that's
legit.
ever been made
Mhm.
by far on a technical level, and the writing is way above. Now, I will say this: there are a few, like the one I'm about to talk. Well, no, not so much the writing. I'll get to that, but The Great Silence, I think, is a brilliantly written movie, and which is one reason it's holding up so well. Um, Django is well written for a genre movie. It's very pulpy, but it does have a lot of empathy for the hero, and it creates a lot of any archetype that Clint Eastwood didn't make popular, Franco Nero did. So in that
Mhm.
one, the hero isn't just taken out of action for a while like Clint Eastwood is, and I guess for a few dollars more, and then he goes and sneaks and gets the gold. Well, Django, he goes and sneaks the gold, puts it in his coffin where he has his machine gun. He thinks he's safe. He's got a machine gun that's going to kill all the town. And the whole town, except for the people who hang out and live at the bar, are, well, they're proto Klansmen. They're all white supremacists,
Oh
bandits.
boy.
Yeah, run by a Southern general, played by Eduardo Fajardo, who is in every third Italian movie ever fucking made. And he's in Lisa and the Devil, but you wouldn't know it at first because he's very versatile actor, um he's a mean motherfucker in this. And so Django, the coffin with the gold, well, goes into the quicksand. Well, he throws it into the quicksand, and the Mexicans aren't happy about it because they want it. That's another thing. There's a lot of Mexicans in spaghetti westerns. I mean, a lot of them are sympathetic or even some occasionally lead characters, even though usually played by a white person. Not in the case of Tomas Milian. He's genuinely a person of color. But um, then they crush his hands, first with the
Mhm.
butts of the rifles. Then, as the horses are riding off, for good measure, they run over his hands. And every time I watch this movie, and this is one I've seen probably 75 times, I went, so I'm doing thinking about it. Um, I didn't mean to go on a review of Django, but I will. I'm kind of saying that the Django that spawned a ton of movies that were ostensibly about the same character.
Mhm.
Arguably, only one, and I think it's Django Building a Coffin, seems to be the exact character continuity wise. And then there was an official sequel in the 80s. So I consider there's three movies with that character. But then there's lots of other characters that are called Django. Sometimes they were called Django in Italy. Usually they put Django in the title somewhere. And the main character, what it had in common with Django is he's kind of where spaghetti westerns evolved, or to snooty film snobs would say devolved from Leone, is the very dark side of it. Leone broke it open, the whole anti-hero, cynical, indifferent, mercenary, ambiguous, just pure evil characters like Frank, played by Henry Fonda. But After Django, they started wearing more black clothes. They got way more violent, and it just kind of went off the rails. Just like most Italian films followed the world. The world became more permissive cinematically starting in around 1965, 66, 67. And this movie, Django Kill, the main character is never named. He doesn't wear all black clothes. He actually is a person of color, played by Tomas Milian, who is a mixed race Cuban. And though he mainly worked in Italy, sometimes in Spain, and occasionally in America. And he lived in Florida when he died, and he was 80 years old. He hasn't been dead that long. He's a lot older than I knew he was. He's a lot older than he looks. Like in this movie, he's pushing 40. He looks like early 20s because he was actually one of the original actors of the Stella Adler and Uta Hagen and the
Mhm.
studio, the actor studio in New York. He went from Cuba. That was his education. That was his college, and he studied all that stuff. He knew James Dean. He knew all those people. And I'll never forget an interview of him on an Anchor Bay disc. It wasn't this film, but it was a spaghetti western, and they were talking to him about his ideas, his techniques, and he says, and he's very passionate. He's very Latino, very Latin passionate, and he almost starts to cry, and he made me cry. And he's like, I know one thing. A lot of people hate me. A lot of people think I'm no good. I'll tell you one thing in this world. I can fucking act. And I'm like, you go, boy. It's so incredible. So yes, he can act. In this movie, he doesn't have a lot to work with, but he acquits it well. He's kind of a guy who's more reactive. He kind of like lets things happen around him. And basically him and a bunch of other Mexican guys dig up this gold for this posse of white crackers, and then the leader of the white crackers, Oaks, says, well, and they open fire like a firing squad and kill all of the Mexicans, including our main character. They fall into a mass grave. Then the movie begins. And in
That was
this
one hell of an introduction.
in this segment, Questi's still using the super quick, like Kenneth Anger, Kurt Kren kind of cutting and weird subliminals. I haven't frame by frame Django Kill, but I'm sure it's got something wild in there. But what you see is interesting because some of them are, as a lot of people use, flash forwards to later parts in the movie. And these two Indian shaman basically raise him from the dead, and there's no special effects, there's nothing mystical around it. He doesn't come out of the grave with mist or dig through the grave wasn't completely covered over. So he does dig through a little bit, but it's not like Lucio Fulci where they're coming out through the dirt, or Sugar Hill. And he's fine. He's a little shell shocked though, naturally. And he does want revenge, and he wanders into this town, which those guys wandered into. So these evil guys, it turns out they've wandered into a town that seems like an average Western town. And, they go to the bar and everybody seems cool. And then when it's learned that they killed all these Mexicans, and that wasn't their first massacre, they are massacred. And the violence is extremely graphic. This violence of this scene was left in the American prints. There are two scenes of violence that actually never were even allowed to be in American prints, but Anchor Bay restored them and put subtitles, as they did with a lot of movies, even Deep Red, whenever they had the extra scenes.
Mhm.
And but this one was just extremely violent, but just nothing you haven't seen before. Just, and they hang them upside down and cut them and, shoot at them. It's just really just, we're having fun. But of course, they're all self-righteous about it. There's a minister character, of course, and he knows the town's soul, and he's like, these men were killers. This is justice. Justice is important. And so Oaks, the guy who led the massacre in Django, is holed up in a building, and they're all trying to get him out. And his revolver, I mean, he fires that thing without reloading. I'd say at least 30 times.
Mhm.
I was just stunned. I mean, some spaghetti westerns, they fire like 7, 8, 9 times. Not this guy. He just keeps firing and firing and firing and firing. He never hits anybody, and they never hit him. And they do break all the windows out and just about destroy the building he's in. And Thomas Milian, his stranger, just kind of strolls across the desert, the road in front of these guys. And they're like, who's this guy? And he just kind of goes into the building. And they say, when he goes into the building, and they're like, because they do doubt it's going to be possible from this guy. $500 if someone can kill this guy and complete our justice. And so, again, we have a very unaffected character. I mean, he's happy about it, but it's not like he perks up and goes, "Oh boy, I'm going to get to this, man." But instead, he's smooth, and he's like, "Oaks, I want revenge. Yeah, I'm going to kill you." And he shoots a few times, misses him. He doesn't go over 6. Well, no, he doesn't shoot. That's right. He aims a bunch of times. Oaks keeps shooting at him on and on, never hits him. But now you never know. He might be immortal, so it might not even matter. So Oaks runs out of the building as he's shooting him in the leg. Then he shoots him again in the leg. He shoots him in the side, like Christ-like. He shoots him in the hand, and he only uses 6 bullets, and then he's out of bullets. And they're gold bullets that the shaman who raised him made out of the gold that they mined. And so there's a guy who runs the town, not really, he's not like the mayor, but he kind of is. And his name is Mr. Sorrow, so that's very subtle. And he looks like a decadent Roman, he's very chubby, and he kind of has a balding little kind of monk-like haircut and a beard. He's not a bad looking guy, but he's the kind of guy that would be typecast for these kind of characters. And he's got a gang which he calls his muchachos. So the muchachos are all basically they're not in leather. Well, their hats might be leather and their boots, but they're all in black, and they look like country western versions of Kenneth Anger, Scorpio Rising characters. And guess what? They are. So the word gay is never used in the movie. The word homosexual is never used. Um, but there's like not any kind of doubt. I mean, and a lot of it isn't even what they do. It's this, I mean, that too, but the things he says as the movie goes on, his innuendos get more dirty and more dirty, to where he's just about saying, these boys fuck me so good, I mean, it's like he almost says something exactly like that. And so he wants to enlist Million. Well, first he wants to get the gold bullets. So they take the still living villain of the piece so far. He's about to be outdone. They take him somewhere and do some makeshift doctoring on him. I guess there's some guy like Doc from Gunsmoke, and he doesn't seem to know what he's doing. He doesn't have any herbal remedies or anything, but he's just kind of like, yeah, hold on. He cuts to get a bullet out, and that's a close-up picture. Now that was cut out of the American. He digs in and he pulls the bullet out, blood spurting everywhere. And they're like, it's gold. And then the men ravage his body and dig all the bullets out of the deep wounds. And the guy is the guy at the bar who kind of runs it. He's one of the main characters. He's like, hold on, because he goes to the bar for just a second and they do that. He goes, wait, what's going on? I turn my back and look at you. And he's like, you didn't have to kill him, because like he didn't live through that shock. He was done. So that guy is one of the villains, and him and the preacher guy have a feud, and there's their women are involved, and I'll try to cut it down. But essentially, the shaman appear once in a while and advise Django, and he's just like, okay. And he's very lackadaisical. But towards the end of the movie, he starts to become emotive. And that was probably Tomas Million's idea. Like, I can't play this character the whole movie. I love to act. Stop it. And because he is a very ostentatious actor at times, but he can be low key, or in this case, no key. And he's like, hey, I want that $500, and they're like, oh, we'll give it to you. But then of course they, he's like, keep it. I'm gonna spend the night, and what a night. And by the by the end of the evening, he's had no sleep. He's had sex with the preacher's wife, the other woman, the wife of the bar. She's not the wife of the bartender. She's the mistress, and it's a scandal to the town. So basically what we're finding out is the whole town is depraved. Maybe not in the exact ways that Oaks was, but nonetheless, it's one of those cases where the whole town are fucked up. What has he gotten into? There's two characters who aren't fucked up. One is insane, but she's not fucked up. And she's the preacher's wife, and that's the one that falls in love with Django. Well, I mean, they have sex, because she's talking about, never touching people, and he's kind of getting, he's kind of doing the moves on her silently. He's like stoic. And then they cut, and then they're in bed, and she's like, I love you. Like, good Lord. So the other thing is a kid played by Ray Lovelock, and I forgot his real name, his Italian name, but his working name's always been Ray Lovelock. I think he's still alive. He's done a lot of audio commentaries and interviews for all the movies he's been in, Italian movies. And this was his first movie, and he was still a teenager. I think he did a Autopsy right after this, which is kind of a weird giallo mimsy farmer. But he might have done it right before. That might have been no, Autopsy's right after. And he looks really young. So, and he's blonde and he's handsome. So the muchachos decide they're going to kind of break him in, since Tomas Million's really not interested. And the Mr. Sorrow is continually hectoring him. I'm very disappointed you didn't want to become one of my muchachos. And so they try to make the character named Evan one of their muchachos in a night of drunken. And I'm pretty sure that all of the muchachos initiate him, let's say. And he staggers into the next, outside. And this is when, I'll just call him Django, our main guy, comes upon him. And he likes this kid. He's like, oh, there's actually one nice person in the town, except the girl who is in love with me. And he's like, Evan. And well, the kid has shot himself in the heart. like right after he gets up from the, what has happened to him, which is, so strongly implied they might as well have shown it. That he takes one of their guns and blows himself away in the heart, and he has this wound like this. And this is when the stranger's kind of fucking pissed off. He's like, this guy was a kid. Why did you have to rape? Oops, I'm not supposed to say that. Why did you have to rape and murder him? Now, if it'd been 2 or 3 years later, they could say rape. If it'd been about 10 years later, because it was gay, then they could probably say rape. But in 1970, 71, they're kind of like right on the edge there. So, yeah. And the muchachos are like, fuck this. We still want that gold. And the gold has been hoarded by the barkeep, the preacher, and just becomes a big mess. And of course, Django, pits both sides against each other, like Clint Eastwood always did. And eventually, just about all the characters die. The preacher, who has been hiding the gold, his insane wife sets fire to their house after he locks her in. And meanwhile, Django's busy in the cemetery, getting the gold from. They hid the gold in Evan's body, so he goes getting that out of the coffin. And then the muchachos go there and they're like, "Where is it? We will turn up every grave in this coffin. I mean, every grave in this graveyard. Every one. Open every coffin to get this gold." And while they're out making fools of themselves, he wanders back to town and sees the fire. He can't save the woman because she's locked in. The fire's already consumed most of the place. But what they do see is, and the way it's shot, it reminded me a lot of a Roger Corman horror movie. Just the way it's so jerky, the way it's shot, and is that he reaches up for the gold, but the gold's melting from the fire, and then his whole face becomes covered in gold, and he's screaming. And I never noticed this until yesterday watching it, but his hands are also gold, but they're not dripping. So I thought that was kind of like an ironic effect. Like you wanted the effect, the gold so bad, now he is gold.
It's kind of funny because I'm also thinking of like obviously George R. R. Martin ripped this off for A Song of Ice and Fire.
Well, it's also
with
based
the
on
one-
it's also based on history. That was how Crassus supposedly died.
That's true. Yeah, that is true. I guess these things come back over and over again. But I just that's you were just describing it. I was just like thinking of that one scene where Viserys like gets the crown of gold upon his head. It's melted gold poured onto your head to
and
kill
back to
you, my guy.
Back to Mario Bava. That's pretty much the ending
Yes.
of Diabolic. So
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
True.
So I'm just going to jump ahead because that's kind of that movie. My main point being is the plot is very controversial, scandalous for its day, and apparently Americans, of course, thought it was more controversial than the Italians did. Americans just weren't that hip compared to Italians back then in movies. I mean, I've seen giallos where they say "fuck" that were made in 1969. I mean, no big deal, and it's like it was a movie, this is life, I don't even notice anymore when people curse unless someone points it out to me. But
unless it's like someone who never does and then they do all of a sudden and you're just like, what?
Yeah, if it's out of character, that's usually bad writing. But yeah, he made Arcana in 1975. And Arcana has been one that's very hard to come by. It has never been released officially on DVD or Blu-ray North America. My friend Tim downloaded a copy like 5 or 6 years ago, which he still hasn't watched. And because I was going to get him to pass me a copy. Turns out it was on YouTube. And the guy who put it up on YouTube said that he actually got the print, the tape or whatever the source is, from Guilio Questi before he died. They were corresponding.
Oh, cool.
So it's interesting. It doesn't have all the quick edits. It does have some cool edits and some interesting angles, Orson Welles kind of stuff, but generally it's more formalist in the way it's shot and the story told. And the stars Lucia Bose, who was a Italian or Spanish. I think I always get it mixed up because she's been in a bunch of Spanish and Italian movies. One of those countries, she was a beauty queen in the late 40s. So by this time she's in her late 40s and she looks incredible. But before this, she was in Blood Ceremony, a Spanish movie by Jorge Grau. And in that one, she plays Countess Báthory. And in that one, her main
Hey, Vittori's again.
yes, and in
Go back to
that's
when I
one of the
talked about
best.
lesbian vampires and how for Halloween. Oh my God.
Yeah, and that one she's not a vampire, but she is a horrible person who bleeds people to death. And she has
Yes.
a lot of makeup, and she looks. I don't know. You just don't see really her beauty and the way she's made up in her hair. And this one, you're like, wow, because her hair had gotten super long. And she really looks like a 70s kind of liberated woman. She dresses like somebody at a cosmopolitan, Italian cosmopolitan. And so she has a son who lives with her. The father mysteriously died in a mining accident, and she runs this scam of basically tarot card readings and seance kind of stuff. And none of it's real. And at one point, she slips and mentions that her mother knew real magic. And the son always has an attitude. He's mad at the people who come there. He hit one of them and he tried to disrupt her reading and he yells at her about it. He goes and pouts in his room. And in his room, he starts doing things that, early on, this movie puts these clues together. So, caveat, if you know about ritual magic, you'll get this movie pretty fast like I did. I mean, I wasn't 100% right, but I was 95% right. If you don't, maybe halfway through or 2/3, you will. And because in his room, he takes objects from the pockets of these people who were there, and he starts making these kind of weird. And he takes pictures and he starts burning the faces, all these kind of voodoo like things. And I'm kind of like, oh, so he's trying to do real magic, but he hasn't quite got there yet. So he sleeps with his mother one night when he can't sleep, and it's strongly implied that intercourse occurs, but the edit, maybe they immediately went to sleep, but they were cradled naked together. I don't
I tend
know.
to make assumptions with that with film language, so there you go.
Well, that I believe he had, I believe that's part of his thing is he's obsessed with his mother and the fact he has no father. So these are like the root, and they don't go deep into his psychology. I'm just analyzing it because that's like what I like to do on this channel. But he finally confronts her. Well, one night he comes to her and she thinks, oh yeah, he's gonna come cuddle, but he's holding a knife and he starts slashing at her into just indiscriminately non-fatal parts, very sadistic. And he's like, tell me the truth. Tell me the real magic that your mother told you. I know you know. And she's like, no, I don't know. I don't know. And finally, she's had enough and she whispers it in his ear. You can see her lips moving, but then the sound goes off. So you hear him listening. Us mere mortals can't bear this kind of secret. So I had to bleep it. And so then he begins performing it. And what happened, what happened was it was kind of a key right before that. The two scenes where he's in the bedroom with the mother, while he's in the bedroom with the mother, the cards on her table levitate and start spinning around and laying down as a whatever you call. I should know this. When you lay out all the cards, it's called a. Okay. Anyway, didn't date enough tarot readers, just a few, and also the pots and pans. A couple of dishes break. Uh, so I think like the magic's there and it's starting to come out, and this thing between him and his mother, it's like he's drawing it out of her, not just her telling him, but he's like drawing the power out of her. And then once he knows the secrets, like I guess what to say and all of that kind of stuff, the sigils, uh, then he basically for like 20 minutes wreaks havoc first on the house and then on the entire town. He finds all these random objects. He makes these weird mobiles in public. And it's obviously these are spells. These are all minor spells. And the cops are after him. Everybody's after him for being a vandal and shit. And he keeps running. He can outrun any character. I mean, he was enhanced by his magic. They don't do that, but finally, even the mother, even Lucia's character, is out in the streets with all these people. All these people just come out in the street and they're like by the building and they're all very mesmerized. I can't really describe the very last ending part, so I won't. But I thought it was a movie that was trying to demonstrate something. It had a story, beautifully shot, wonderfully acted. not really a dull moment in between all the pots and pans breaking, the Tarot's floating, and him, having sex with his mother ostensibly. Just anything can happen kind of movie, like the other two I mentioned by him. But I feel like it was the way it was told was straightforward. So maybe he was targeting an overseas horror audience. And I don't think he cracked it. It became a notorious movie, but it didn't become a widely seen movie, and it's still not. But I think it's a failure as a horror movie as far as its resolution. Its points are very oblique. It's one of those movies. Maybe if you watched it 5 times, you would find things. But it is a movie that I believe is speaking a language like a lot of Kenneth Anger's movies do, albeit all of Kenneth Anger's movies do, but in a more accessible way. Speaking a language of magic, like, here's the spell, here's the symbol, here's the sigil, I'm showing this to you, I'm sharing this with you, I'm giving this to you. Do you understand? Do you care? And, that's exactly what this movie basically is. So, yeah. So my verdict is Questi was an idiosyncratic to the nth power. And he made one other wild genre movie in 1982 called Vampirismus. It's almost impossible to find. The first few minutes of it are on YouTube. Music's incredible. So yeah, and Tim didn't know about any of his other stuff. And if Tim McLean didn't know, then I give up. But I just wanted to present him as somebody who has worked in various genres that Italy had popular at that time. I mean, he did the Giallo when it's starting. He did the spaghetti western at its peak. He started to do the supernatural horror right before Argento and Fulci started doing it. I don't think he influenced them, but he was kind of trying to get he was on that wave, but he just didn't break through.
I think with a lot of like movements like that, like artistic movements in film and other art forms, there's just kind of like a vibe of the time, and it's not necessarily that somebody like it's not that people have all of the same ideas totally separately, but it's also not that they're necessarily copying each other. It's
Right.
like the things work at the time that they do because it just kind of clicks with something in the culture. And I think that's why we get really big movements like that, like the supernatural horror that was going on during this time in Italy. It's really interesting how that kind of goes.
I could go really deep with the phenomenon you're talking about because it's a phenomenon that's been studied by scientists about everything that humans do.
Everything.
But